first step to receive feedback is to being open and receptive to that.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? And welcome back to another episode of Off the Mat. My name's Josh Dumoulin, and this is
Nicole Stratichuk.
And we are coming at you guys with an episode that I think all of us in some way or another could use work on. I know I have definitely had to develop this skill over the years, and there's definitely been times as I have grown, matured a little bit, that I have gotten better with this, but I still actually find myself not doing this as good as I should, and it might not be in the framework that we're going to be talking about with martial arts and instruction about how you do techniques. But there's other avenues where I could definitely improve on this.
Yes, and definitely our students that come to our school, you can see as they get better at this skill, they get better in Taekwondo.
That's right. And we are talking all about how to receive feedback. How to receive feedback, how to do it correctly, or at least, graciously, because a lot of times when we get feedback, we immediately think of it as a negative way. Like we automatically go to that like defensive guard up, and I don't know why, but it's hard to get that feedback, that critical feedback that is so important for us. But there's a way to handle it, and some people do it really well. Like we have some students that like we give feedback, and the steps that we're going to be talking about, you can almost see them going through all of them like right away, right to that last point where they're coming at us, not only making the corrections, but like coming back at us with more questions about what it is they need, with complete humility and grace, and just being like, you know what, hey, how exactly. So anyway, let's kind of talk about.
And I think those students that have achieved black belt or some even just the higher belts, they have gotten a pretty good handle on this, hopefully by black belt. But the sooner students can understand how to receive feedback, the more they're just going to benefit. So that's why we really wanted to break it down into some steps of how to receive feedback. And I guess to get us started, there are different types of feedback. And we were alluding more to the negative feedback, but there is positive feedback. However, normally it's easier to receive the positive feedback.
Of course, we all like to hear exactly what we're awesome at.
Right.
We all want to hear that, and we love hearing it when we do a good job. It's what we want to hear.
That we're going to go through, you can even apply these steps to the positive feedback, because if you want to take that positive feedback and be critical about it, it is also going to help you be better, right? So positive feedback is just feedback that reinforces what you're doing right, what you're doing awesome, or just makes you better. And it's important for coaches to give that positive feedback, because then you as the student understand what you're doing correctly.
Perfect. So
negative feedback, on the other hand, that's the one that we're really talking about here, because this one is harder for you to just receive effectively, right? And so we've broken down some steps for you so that you can be really open and receptive to receiving this feedback in order to get better at Taekwondo, but apply this to all other areas too.
Right. So we're not going to talk so much about like how we as coaches give that stuff, right? This is straight up, we have given you an instruction, we have given you the thing, and this is how you receive it. Because over the thousands of students that we teach, over the last, how many years, like, a number of different phases, we see how people take this constructive criticism or negative feedback, whatever you want to call it. Like really.
So this episode is for students specifically receiving some form of feedback, especially the negative feedback of how to receive that. And I think a follow-up episode is definitely going to be for coaches, of how to give this feedback, because there is very specific things that need to be followed in that
Yeah,
regard as well.
absolutely. And two, like, I don't know if we really said this already, but like this constructive feedback, this constructive criticism, the negative feedback is really important for a student. Like we actually, like, this is an important, valuable thing that
Right, not just
is
important but essential.
right, needed.
Mhm.
Okay, like we need to get this.
Mhm.
Um to constantly hear what it is you're doing right, it is not going to help your growth in the long term. Like we need to get that feedback, that negative, like, what am I doing incorrectly, so that way I can improve and get better. Because even the top students, like even ones that we have that are really good at what they do, really technically proficient, work hard, they still have things they need to work on. And it's important that when you receive some sort of critical feedback about it, or negative feedback or constructive criticism, that you are able to handle it. And the funny thing is, we find sometimes even the talented ones, those are the ones that take it the hardest.
Yes.
Like it's like what do you mean, like, I need to do this? Well, so this is where we're going to kind of help guide, or at least make you think about what it is that you can do to help take that constructive criticism, that negative feedback, and be able to understand where it's coming from the instructor, but also how you can take that and then be able to use it to improve, grow, and ultimately just get better.
Mhm. Exactly. So we've kind of alluded to it already, but the first step to receive feedback is to being open and receptive to that.
Hmm.
So, having that growth mindset is going to be imperative, first and foremost, for you to be able to receive this negative feedback.
Hmm.
One thing that really helps me with this is that understanding, even in my own experience as a student, understanding that it is the coach's job to do that. It is their job to give you feedback so that you can be better. So when I think about it like that, I'm not inclined to take it so personally. It's not a personal thing at all. It is their job to make me better. And the way that they're going to do that effectively is through feedback.
Hmm. And that's just it. So like that comes down to just like, your mindset around those things, right? Like actually being like, you know understanding where it's kind of coming from. Well,
Yeah. And then on the flip side of that is, understanding that it's the coach's job to make you better through feedback.
mhm,
But then understanding that it is my job as the student to put that into practice and to receive it, right?
mhm,
Like it's a two-way street, right? We're going to work together for you to become the best version of yourself, or the best black belt, or whatever the goal is, in your journey at the moment. Um, so I had a note here that I heard yesterday, and I've heard it before, but it just really applied to what we're talking today, is staying humble and hungry, right? So hungry as in like you always want to get better, right? You always want to achieve that next growth step, or that next belt, or your black belt, right? You're staying hungry for that, at the same time being humble. So that means being open and receptive to the feedback that's going to come your way along your journey to that goal, whether it's black belt, or maybe it's to world championships, or whatever the goal
mhm.
is in martial arts.
So that's just it. So right away, understanding that you're going to receive it,
Hmm.
like no matter what you start in. Like if you start in Taekwondo, at school, like at home, you're going to receive some form of.
Or you should receive
You
it
should.
in order to grow,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's just it. So being open to the idea that it's going to come your way. Like you have to be okay with the idea that you're going to go to class tonight, and there's a good chance your instructor is going to say something like, you need to chamber your leg more. You
hmm
need to lift your leg more. You need to straighten your leg out a little bit more. You need to, tighten your muscles a little bit more. You need to do this. And or whatever it is. And again, we're not going into the phrasing of how we're giving the feedback. Again,
Yeah.
this is how we're taking it. So
Yeah, and that understanding again that it's the coach's job to do that, and understanding that, martial arts instructors, we do what we do with this like love and care for our students, right? And so even as a coach, I have to remember that too, is that it's not about me, it's about the student. And so in order for me to help that student get better, I have to be able to give this feedback. So yeah, once you have that like really openness and receptiveness and understanding of how that works between a coach and a student, or instructor and student, it just helps you be open to it, right?
That's right. So first step, be open. Be open to the idea of what the instructor, the coach, the parent has given you. Be open to the idea that like the
Yeah, really adopt that growth mindset.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
If you have your mind right, then it's just going to be that much easier to receive the feedback.
That's right. It will be. Right. So next part, of course, controlling your response to it. Now, if you're open to it, then of course controlling it is going to be pretty easy because you're going to be open to the idea of it. But also, you might be open to it, but don't be frustrated with the idea that like you've been given something to work on. Like, don't get angry, don't roll your eyes, don't get upset. Like, control, like, because you can't control the idea that this feedback came, but you can certainly control how you respond to it. So respond to it with like, some self-control. Like, don't right away go on that defense, right? Control your emotional response to it.
Yeah, like just speaking from experience, like we're humans, we have emotions that come out, but we can control how we respond to those emotions. So personally for me as a student, when I receive feedback, I am open and receptive because I really do have that growth mindset. However, when I get that feedback instantly, I have an emotional response, right? Like an emotion comes in and immediately I feel frustrated with myself. I get hard on myself. I get down on myself. But then it is up to me to control that. Because if I cannot get in control of my emotions, I am not going to be able to receive the feedback to make me better. So, you might have to have some tools in your toolkit in order to get that best response. So whether that is when you receive that feedback and you feel that emotion coming on, like maybe it's a breathing exercise, right, in that moment, so that you can get your mind right and get your thoughts right, reframing those negative thoughts into more positive, right? So instead of saying like, what I say to myself a lot is like, man, Nicole, you suck. Instead of saying that, is reframing like, okay, Nicole, there's an opportunity for you to learn something, for you to get better here. And let's be open and receptive to the coach that's coaching me right now.
Okay. Perfect.
The next thing, number 3 is once we're open and receptive, we have learned how to control our emotions when we're receiving that feedback. The third thing is to really actively listen to the instructor giving the feedback, right? So to listen actively, we have to have our emotions in control in order to, listen actively. But we need to, maintain the eye contact with our coach, maintain the eye contact with our instructor so that they know we're listening. That helps us focus on what they're doing. When they give the feedback, I can, nod in acknowledgement and just really focusing on what they're saying and focusing on the details. So if they say, oh, you need to have more balance and power in your kick. And the way that you're going to do that is by the position of your foot or the chamber of your knee, that sort of thing. Like, what are those details that they are giving you? Because that's the details that you really need to hear in order to implement the feedback well.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Perfect. This one here, like, being able to ask, right? Like, sometimes the feedback you might get, the criticism or whatever, you might not quite understand. So don't be afraid to just ask. Like, just ask what you mean, right? Like, because sometimes even as a coach, sometimes it's like, We got to give that feedback right away. And there's a good chance that hearing it, you might not understand fully what that means. So by controlling your emotions, staying clear, being receptive to it, but then going like, like, what exactly, sir? Like, what do you mean? Like,
Yeah,
what do you mean?
what
Like,
do you mean by
yeah,
having my foot in the proper
yeah.
foot position? What does
Where does
that
that
look
mean?
like?
Yeah,
Can you show me an
yeah.
example?
Because there's maybe a chance that you didn't know that the foot is supposed to be in a certain position when you
Mm-hmm.
throw a turning kick. Like you
Mm-hmm.
were supposed to pivot our foot. Had no idea.
Right.
What foot are you talking about? How am I supposed to pivot my foot? Not that one, the other one. But seek some sort of clarification, being able to ask. Like actually have the, I don't know if I want to say like confidence, but like the actual just like, like, yeah, confidence,
And openness.
openness to ask.
Yeah.
Like, and we don't have to do it like uh in a frustrated way, or again a defensive way, but like
Inquisitive.
inquisitive, because ultimately you're going back to that first step. The coach's job is to make you better, and your job is to take that feedback and improve
Yeah.
with it, right? So like being able to ask and get the clarification can make a
Yeah, and
big
we
difference.
always hear that thing like there's no stupid questions. There really isn't, because once the coaches understand that like it's our job as coaches to give feedback and help make the student better, there is no stupid questions from students, right? If they are unclear about that foot position, then it's my job to make sure that they do get clear on that, because
Mm-hmm.
it's going to help them be better, right? So don't be ashamed or feel awkward about asking such questions, because it's only going to help you be better. And that's what we all want.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yep. So next step, act on that. Like this is where I think a lot of people get stuck. So there's a mix, right? There's some people who right away can't control the emotional response to the feedback. They get frustrated, they roll their eyes, they throw their arms up in the air. I just had it one yesterday with one of the boys. I literally all I wanted him to do was just switch his hands from doing left right punch. He was doing right left punch. I just wanted him to switch his hands. And he, oh, like no, like no. And it was, so anyway, that's few, but where a lot of people do, they'll hear that, switch the hands, do left, right. Okay, not a problem. But then it's like where I feel like a lot of people get stuck is right here. Act with effort.
Yeah, an
Like
intentional effort.
with intentional effort. This is where I feel a lot of people get to. Hey, let's just talk about patterns for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, put your hand onto your hip when you're demonstrating the movements. Your hand goes onto the hip when you're in a walking stance punch. Okay, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks go by, and I have that same exact student come up to me and they'll be like, hey, what do I need to work on? Well, you haven't fixed the one thing that I told you to fix 4 weeks ago, and you're actually going to come and say, can you watch my pattern and see what I need work on? No, because you haven't fixed that yet.
Right.
And I say it like that, like no, we've got to fix this, man. Like I can't fix like the other things that you do, because there's a good reason why a a feedback or criticism or note has been given to you, is because that's what you need work on now. Then you can work on this, and then you can work on this, and it just stacks from there. But this is where a lot of people do, is they'll get that feedback and then it just sort of gets like stuffed away into
Right.
like a,
Or what I see is like you'll
right
give the
back here.
feedback in the moment, and the student will hear it, receive it, and implement it
Mm-hmm.
for the next 4 moves. And then they lose the intention with
Right.
it, right? So it is, once you receive that feedback, like there is importance behind why you're receiving that feedback. And so it is your job to take the feedback and be intentional with it, not
Mm-hmm.
for 4 moves, but for the entire
Right.
pattern, for that entire practice, for the entire next 2 weeks, for you to focus on that feedback so that you can get better.
That's right. And that's the thing. It's like, like we, I think we get caught up in this idea, like sometimes where it's like we want to get all of this, just work on that one thing. But like that one thing whatever it is, if it's chambering your leg more, if it's bringing your hand back to your chin after a punch, if it's in patterns, pulling your hand to your hip, if it's a stronger stance, if it's a bend of the knee, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Just get that one thing and just get that down. But you have to act with effort. Like,
Right.
you've got to put the effort into doing it. And when you can do that, then, like I said, a lot of people have this. Like, they'll most people, I would say, take the stuff, and then this is right where they
Yeah.
get caught right
I
here,
I
close
also
to the end.
yeah, I also find that students get into this comparison game, right? So if I've got Susie over here and George over here, and I say to Susie, Susie, you got to just like turn the angle of your foot just a little bit on your side kick in that pattern. Okay. Perfect. Now, George over here, he's not ready for that feedback. He needs to work on something more foundational, more basic, which is fine. But and so I might give George feedback on, okay, let's get your walking stance correct. Okay, so this is the position that
Mm.
your feet need to be in. I need you to focus on that. But he's like looking at this feedback about the side kick, and that's way more exciting than the feedback about the walking stance. So he's here asking questions about the feedback that we gave to Susie. And it's like, don't do that. Don't worry about the feedback someone else got, even though it might seem more exciting, more flashy, or whatever. Focus on the feedback that was specifically given to you.
Mhm.
And sometimes as coaches we give feedback to the entire class just based on like generalities that we've seen
Right.
throughout the class. I mean, and that is for everybody. But when you receive that feedback, this is going to go into like how to give feedback, but it is very specific, and it is very specific to you. So make sure that you're implementing that specific feedback that was meant for you.
Mhm.
Don't get into the comparison game.
Perfect. So after you've acted and put some effort into it, and have made a conscious effort. Now, will it happen tomorrow? Maybe not. Really depends on how critical or difficult the feedback was. Like, placing your hand on your hip, for a pattern, let's say. Yeah, that might not take you long to correct. It will take a conscious effort to do.
Mm-hmm.
But wherever you're at, whether you're on your way to fixing it and putting your effort into it, next step is to actually reflect and evaluate. So, like,
Mm-hmm.
actually going through, you know, what it was that you got. Have I been, making the change? Have I corrected it? You know,
Yeah, and
is it
evaluating the feedback that you got, right?
right?
So is it now most of the time, like 99% of the time when you're in taekwondo class and an instructor gives you feedback, it is relevant to your goals.
Hmm.
That's our job as coaches, as instructors, is to make sure we get you from point A to point B. So 99% of the time it is going to be valid. But just checking to make sure that that feedback that you got, is it valid and relevant to your goals, right? And if it is, maybe there's just further clarification that you need. Am I implementing it correctly? Like, I understood to put my hand on my hip, but is it like upside down, or what's the angle of my fist? Like, getting even maybe more specific and evaluating what that feedback was and how your implementation of it was.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the final step, I mean, we could kind of combine those three, but like reflect, evaluate, and follow up, right?
Hmm.
Because after you take that moment to reflect, like after class, in future classes, right, you're still reflecting on that feedback and trying to evaluate it. You may come up with follow up questions like that might lead to something else, or like specifically maybe what is the angle, or things like that. So make sure that you're doing that follow up, and possibly enlisting or getting support in order so that you can keep that new skill a habit and consistent going forward, right? So
Right.
whatever that support might be, it might be like, at practice at home, getting mom and dad or siblings to kind of give you that feedback too, like how are you doing implementing it, or maybe following up with the coach and saying, hey, I think I've fixed this. I listened to what you said and you told me to put my hand like this. Can you watch a couple moves here just to make sure I've implemented that correctly?
And that's just it. We actually get some kids that do that.
Yes.
Like some kids, teens, adults that will actually do that. And they don't just do it the next class just to come in and be like, they take the time, they put the effort, they reflect, they come in, a week, 2 weeks later, and they're like, hey, I think I've got this. And it's like, either one of two things will happen. It's like, yes, that's exactly it. That's what I was looking for. Great job. Know that there's going to be something else around the corner that you're going to need to work on. But
it's like a never-ending cycle when it comes to
that's
feedback.
That's right? The perfect thing, though. That's what is great about martial arts. It is the quest for perfection that never happens. You'll never be perfect at it, nor should you be, because I don't think it would be fun if it wasn't. But one of two things will happen. One, yes, that's exactly what we needed, or that's close. Now, if you do it a little bit more like this, like there's still maybe some minor adjustments that happen. But again, if you've gone through all of those steps to get to the point where you've followed up, we know as a coach, we know that student's going to be on their way to dialing in that thing any minute.
It's so awesome because initially we saw this, right? We gave them the feedback to do this and they came back and followed up here and they weren't quite at where they needed to be, but then we gave them more follow-up feedback. So now they've exceeded it. And so now they come back and they're like, hey, I think I fixed this. And we're like, oh, awesome. So now here's the new feedback.
Right.
And it just like this constant ladder climb to improving yourself, improving your skills, whatever it might be. Right.
And that's just it. But ultimately, with all of this, all of this being said is once you can really take that, constructive feedback and criticism about what you need done or fixed or adjusted, once you can really do that with that open mind, understanding and action and everything, you're on your way to being, a really good martial artist, right? Like a really good, either technically or even just, as just a martial artist as a whole, right?
The cool thing about this is you don't need to be a blue belt to implement this. You don't need to be a black belt to implement this. You can implement this day one of your martial arts journey.
The thing is, you don't need to be in martial arts to do this. Right. This is actually something, like I said, I can take feedback about technique, not a problem. If I go to a seminar, I'm usually, if we go to seminars, if the instructors are like, okay, now it's time for somebody to come up so we can rip them apart, I am the first one to go up there and get torn to shreds on what I need to fix and what I need to work on. Because trust me, I got tons of stuff I need work on. So when it comes to Taekwondo, and what I do in patterns or my kicks or something like that, I will be the first person to go up there. That's the openness that I have to those things. Now, I need work on other areas in my life with this. So it's not just a martial artist who could benefit from that, because again, this is how we grow.
Right. So it's you're really good at implementing these steps in Taekwondo, but why not implement them in how you run business or how you do other personal things or personal relationships or anything like that, right?
And this is a side note. I actually think this is why a lot of Taekwondo instructors, when they become instructors, they don't go and get coaching themselves on how to run their business better, how to teach their curriculum better, how to teach in general better. Because we know plenty who have schools but don't teach well, right? But actually, again, taking that feedback of hey, you should try this. What do you mean? What do you mean I should try it like that? What do you mean come on, dude.
Just
mindset. Chill out. Chill out. You were open when you were a white belt about this, understand where it's coming from. And that really bleeds into this. Understand that anytime anybody does this, more often than not, I would say 99% of the time, more often than not, it is coming from a place of love, care, compassion, like a genuine, actual desire for you to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And we just had, parent teacher interviews. And this was one of the things I had talked to one of the parents about. And I had to remind the student that, like, understand that when me or any of the coaches tell you to do something, it is coming from a place of, we want you to get better. So as soon as you can, this is where even parents, we have to remind our kids about that. Hey, remember that, they do this because they care about you. They do this
Mm-hmm.
because they love you. They do this because they want you to get better. They want to see you improve. So, when you can remember that, you know what, it's never personal. Like, I shouldn't say never, but like, I would say, like, seriously, like 99% of the time. But all too often we take it personally, like, you know, well, they're trying to, you know, make me feel bad. They're no. It's seriously, it's coming from a place of love, where we really want you to get better.
Right. And again, just as me as like a competitor when I was younger, if I wasn't able to do this, I wouldn't have gotten to where I was
Mm-hmm.
today, right? I mean, and it took practice to receive feedback, just like any other skill. Like receiving feedback is a
Yep.
skill, so you have to practice it. But the sooner you can figure this out, the sooner it gets easier, and just the way that you're going to grow is going to be faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And more effective because you can actively put this into
Yep.
practice. So, yeah.
And I think, I don't know, maybe it's generational. I don't know, like, all too often we are too afraid to give our kids,
Criticize.
yeah, like, no, like, they need to hear it. Like,
Hmm.
and as a parent, it's our job to sort of teach them, you know, that, hey, dude, you're gonna sometimes hear things that you ain't always gonna like.
Yeah, and when we're talking about that, like that's where the reflection or reflect, evaluate,
Mhm.
follow up becomes even more important, right? Because if you receive feedback and like in the realm of taekwondo, and like I was saying, like if you're in taekwondo class, you wouldn't be at that school or in that class if you didn't already trust and have respect for the instructors, right? So, but maybe there's other times that you receive feedback, and it's important for you to reflect and evaluate to make sure that it is valid,
Mhm.
and makes sense, right? And so it's like teaching that problem solving skill to our kids too, is to evaluate the feedback that they're receiving, and yeah, implementing it the right way.
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, um,
Should we recap these? I think it was 7
yeah,
steps
do
that we
do
gave you. We
do
gave you.
do a quick recap of everything.
So, how to receive feedback. These were our 7 steps for you, and they kind of happen in this order. So, number one is being open and receptive. So, having that growth mindset and staying humble and hungry. Okay. Number two is to control your emotional response when you receive that feedback. We're human. We are going to experience those emotions, but it is up to us how we respond so that we can stay focused on the feedback, not our
Mhm.
emotions. Number three is once the emotions are in check, is to listen actively. So don't just hear what we're saying or what your coaches are saying. Really listen, right? Make eye contact, nod in acknowledgement. Number four was to seek clarification. So after you've gotten that feedback, what else are you questioning, right? Did you understand it? Do you need a detailed explanation? Ask those questions. And number five is this is the step where we see many people struggle to implement is act with intentional effort. Okay, so if you've received the feedback, you understand it, you've clarified it, now it's your job as the student to put it into practice and keep it focal, right? Like don't keep it in your focus for the next several training sessions. And then the next step would be to reflect, evaluate, and follow up, right? So if you implemented that feedback with intentional effort, now go back, like make sure, have you implemented it the right way? Follow up with your coach and instructor to make sure that you've done it correctly.
Perfect.
There's
Right
your
on.
7 steps to receiving feedback.
Perfect. Well, again, guys, thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode. It would mean the world to us if you would do us a favor and just go ahead and leave us a 5-star review on any one of those platforms that you are listening to. And if you are watching us on YouTube, please hit subscribe. It really helps us grow the channel here, because that is kind of our ultimate goal with this whole show, is that we can help as many parents, students in martial arts, people with martial arts, just parents in general, with just helping yourself or your kids just become the best version of themselves. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Off the Mat. My name is Josh Jumlin, and this is
Nicole Stratichuk.
And we will talk to you guys all soon.